KHKT News Today.
U.S. Health Secretary Tom Price has resigned over the use of expensive private planes for official business. He previously apologized after making 26 private flights since May at a cost of $400,000, £300,000, to taxpayers. Government officials, except those dealing with national security matters, are required to take commercial flights for work-related travel. 3 other members of President Donald Trump's cabinet are under scrutiny for using private planes while working. A White House statement said President Trump had accepted Mr. Price's resignation, adding that Don J Wright had been designated as acting health secretary. Mr. Wright is currently Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health. In his letter of resignation, seen by the New York Times, Mr. Price said he regretted that recent events have created a distraction from the work of the health department. An investigation by the political news website Politico found that Mr. Price's travels had cost more than $1 million, £750,000. As well as the $400,000 for private flights. That figure includes the cost of military aircraft used for Mr. Price's trips abroad, Politico added. President Trump had earlier said he was not happy with the expense. Gray line. A scandal too big to ignore. Anthony Zerker, BBC News Washington. In July, Donald Trump joked that if Tom Price didn't get a Republican health care plan through Congress, he would be fired. People laughed. Obamacare repeal went down in flames again this week, and Mr. Price is out. No one is laughing now, no Republicans, at least. The situation is more complicated than that, of course. An ever-ballooning price tag for Mr. Price's private jet trips became a scandal too big to ignore. The exorbitant spending, breaking with past practices, cut directly against Mr. Trump's campaign promise to rein in wasteful spending. If Mr. Price had given the president the legislative victory he desperately wanted, the secretary may have been spared. Instead, he was marched to the gallows. The risk for the administration has not passed. Other officials have racked up their own inordinately high travel expenses. Senior presidential advisor Kellyanne Conway was on one of Mr. Price's flights, hinting that the scandal may reach inside the White House. The precedent has been established that such extravagances can be a fireable offense. Gray line. Hours before Mr. Price's resignation, he told White House reporters, "He's a very fine man. We're going to make a decision sometime tonight. He's a very, very fine man." 3 other members of Mr. Trump's cabinet are under scrutiny for their use of private planes while on the job. Interior Secretary Ryan Zink flew from Las Vegas to Montana last June on a private jet that cost taxpayers more than $12,000, according to Politico and The Washington Post. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin is accused of flying with his wife to view last month's solar eclipse. Environmental Protection Agency Chief Scott Pruitt has spent more than $58,000 on non-commercial travel. As well as the Vegas-Montana trip, a route served by commercial flights, Mr. Zink is also reported to have used private jets between St. Croix and St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands in March, and a military aircraft to travel to Norway in May. Interior Department spokeswoman Heather Swift said in a statement that, as with previous Interior Secretaries, Mr. Zink traveled on charter flights when there were no commercial options available. All travel is pre-approved by the Ethics Office before booking, and the charter flights went through an additional level of due diligence, she said.